What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the FF Ballbusters podcast. My name is Will. Joining me is my co-host Eric, and today we're going to be talking our top 5 quarterbacks going into the 2024 NFL Draft. And as a bonus for you guys, we're also going to be going over our top 5 tight ends as well. So make sure you stick around for that. But before we get into it, Eric, you got anything for the people?
Yeah, man, just really happy with all of the support that we've been getting as of late. We really appreciate you guys. We just we just hit 1.1 thousand subscribers. So we want to keep that momentum going. If you guys are enjoying the content, let us know by leaving a like on the video and also hitting that sub button so we can keep that going and hopefully hit our goal of 1.5 thousand subscribers here as we head into the Dynasty offseason. And also, if you want to hit that notification bell so you can stay in the know for all of our latest videos. And lastly, leave us a comment. Obviously, these rankings and tier lists can get kind of controversial. People have different opinions. People, have expertise in different areas, different position groups. So if you have an opinion that you want to let us know about the quarterbacks or tight ends today, feel free to put that in the comments below. We'd love to hash it out with you. But I think that's all I got, and I'm ready to get into it.
Absolutely. This is going to be a fun list. Don't expect to see Talia Tungavailoa on this list. I don't know if any Maryland fans are out there, but he's not going to be here. But with that being said, shout out UMD. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and get into this list. Eric, how do you want to start this one off for us with the quarterbacks?
I'm down to just start it at the top, and I'm wondering if we're in agreement here. I have Caleb in a tier of his own at the top.
I absolutely agree. He is the 101, and he is in a tier of his own. But what do you feel about Caleb Williams as a prospect? 'Cause I know you probably have a lot written down for him.
Yeah, so I want to try to keep it fairly concise, but obviously supreme arm talent, ridiculous arm talent. Like we're talking Stafford, Mahomes, Rodgers type ability with his velocity, accuracy, touch from any arm angle and any platform. He can make any throw on the football field. Really impressive athleticism. He doesn't have blazing speed or quickness like you're going to see from a guy like Jaden Daniels in this class, but he's got really good vision and elusiveness as a ball carrier. And so I think that makes him a real threat as a runner. He can throw at all 3 levels. And then something that I think might be underrated of his because people talk about, how long he holds onto the football. But I think he does have really good pocket awareness and sack avoidance as a quarterback. So those are kind of the strengths that I see from Caleb Williams. And then some of the weaknesses, I do think he leans too hard on his physical abilities at times, where, he could just take a check down. He could just, hit whatever the progression is in the play as it's drawn up and instead tries to play hero ball. But something that we've talked about kind of ad nauseum on this channel is that the Lincoln Riley offensive system kind of counted on that and his kind of backyard playmaking ability. It was really one read, and then if it's not there, you got to go make a play. And so it's hard to put all of that on him. And then the last thing that I have, and something that really reared its head in that Notre Dame game that everybody wants to point to, is that he needs to be more aware of like adjacent DBs and linebackers in zone coverage. A lot of times when he's playmaking, scrambling, extending the play, he'll lose track of guys in zones close to his intended receiver, and that can put him in dangerous situations.
No, I absolutely agree with everything you said. Just to add a couple more notes, just to even just bolster your notes a little bit more. He is the best improviser in this class, as Eric was alluding to, by far.
Yeah.
He has great patience and touch when he is throwing the ball and he is making those plays, extending those plays. And like Eric kind of alluded to, his one knock is that he can do too much, but something that comes along with that is he's good enough to do too much sometimes. So where that can be a weakness, it can also be a great strength for Caleb Williams. And he's just kind of been that guy for a while now. So for him to be up here, I think it's 100% justified.
Absolutely. And on that note of like doing too much, I think this year might have been good for him in that he finally learned what he can get away with and what he can't. Like I feel like throughout his entire career he's been able to do whatever he wants whenever he wants. And finally this year with an atrocious offensive line, like genuinely one of the worst interior offensive lines I've seen in a really long time. Terrible defense, so it's terrible running game as well. So we had to carry the whole team. He finally realized, it's like, okay, there are limitations to this. I need to rein it back, and I think he closed the season really strong. So that was good to see.
Yeah, and any attitude problems, anything like that people keep trying to throw onto him, I think that's all just smoke, to be honest with you. I wouldn't buy into that too much. I think he's a great prospect, and he's going to continue to be a great prospect.
Absolutely.
Moving on to the next set of quarterbacks we've got, because I believe we have these two tiered correctly, or in the same tier as well. That's going to be Jaden Daniels and Drake May. But which one of these guys do you want to tackle first?
I'd like to talk about Jaden Daniels. Initially, before I really got into the tape, I had Drake May as my two, Jaden Daniels as my three. They're in the same tier, so they're very close together, and I could make arguments for either one. But after watching some of the tape, and there's still, plenty of tape to be dug into. It's not a final ranking yet, but I have Jaden Daniels at two. Um, there are the concerns that he's an older prospect. He's a fifth year senior, 23 years old. Didn't truly break out until this fifth year. If you look at the PFF grades, he wasn't above an 80 PFF grade until this year, whereas Drake May and Caleb were both basically hovering around 90 every year that they were the starter. But in terms of strengths, he's got he's also got really really good arm talent, great velocity, touch, and accuracy. The rushing ability is so dynamic. He's got great speed, shifty and elusive in the open field, and surprisingly accurate. Like, you could see it in the counting stats in terms of his completion percentage, but he throws such a pretty ball, especially the deep ball and like fades in the red zone. He's money with those every single game. So I was really impressed with what I saw from him.
No, I absolutely agree. Like he won the Heisman this year, and for good reason. He's the best dual threat quarterback in this class. Um, like I said, like Eric said, this year was a massive leap up for him. So a little bit, not a red flag, but just a little concerning that he wasn't able to truly break out into that fifth year. But that's not to say he wasn't productive throughout his college career, because he did find some success before this year as well. And he sustained two great wide receivers in Brian Thomas Jr. and obviously Malik Neighbors, who was able to have a historic season at LSU as well. He just really has all the tools that you would really need at the next level. I feel like he has one of the best deep balls out of this quarterback class as well, like Eric alluded to. And honestly, just going forward, I feel like out of ceiling players, besides Caleb Williams, of course, the guy in a tier of his own, out of all the guys with a good ceiling, I feel like Jaden Daniels has the highest one out of all of these prospects besides Caleb Williams. I just really feel like at the next level, if his game is able to translate over correctly, I feel like he has a lot of room to grow. I feel like he's one of those guys who, throughout this season, we've watched him grow as the season has gone along. Hell, we've even watched him grow as the games have gone along. I feel like he learns pretty quickly. And, I feel like going forward, if he's able to land in the right spot, which is, of course, going to be something for all of these guys, is all going to depend on landing spot. But if he lands in the right place, he could be a spectacular player in the NFL. Size concerns aren't really a thing for me. I've seen he's 6'3", 210, 203, which I forget where he falls along in that
He's
range.
depends where you look. He's listed at
Yeah,
different weights. What I've heard from a lot of like the scouting community is that he's listed at 210, but he's probably more like 200, maybe just
yeah,
over 200 soaking wet. So he is on the skinny side, which does worry me a little bit just because he doesn't slide. But kind of similar to what we've talked about with Lamar, he doesn't really slide either, but he uses his rushing ability and like his elusiveness to avoid like hard contact most of the time. Although you
hmm
will see a fair
yeah.
amount of big hits on the highlight tape as well. So something to at least take a note of.
Absolutely. But with that being said, Jaden Daniels, very exciting prospect. And moving to the other guy we've got in this tier with Drake May. So me and Eric kind of differ a little bit here. I still kind of have Drake May at my number two, but it's a very, very slight number two. I just feel like Drake May has been at the level he's been playing at for just a little bit longer than Jaden Daniels has, so that's what gives him the slight edge. He's also a little bit younger. I'm not really too huge into the age debate, but I feel like that is a factor people are going to be looking at. But in terms of just talent as a player, I think Drake May has great arm talent. He's got just a great arm itself. He can make just about every throw you need him to make out there on the field. He's got good decision making. He's also a good dual threat quarterback as well. A lot of people are going to say sneaky athletic. I think he's just athletic. He's got the build to go along with it too at 6'4", 230. So he's really got that prototypical build that you're looking for in a quarterback at the NFL level. And, that's not to say that he's perfect or the most consistent, but at the same time, when we're talking about consistency and stuff like that for these guys up here in this tier, we're really just nitpicking because we're trying to find things that could be, holes in the armor, because Drake May has been a great prospect for the 2 years that he has started for UNC. And even with this year, a lot of inline changes happen. So There was a little bit of consistency issues. Some people may call that trust issues between him and the line because not really a group he was super familiar with going into this year, but still able to find a lot of success this season. But I'm interested to hear what you got to say about Mr. Drake May here.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I like we kind of talked about. I do have him at 3. He's the youngest of the group at 21 years old. You talked about his prototypical size. I think he throws with great anticipation. Of the 3, he's the strongest in that area for sure. There's no issues where he has to wait for wide receivers to come open. He's hitting them immediately out of their break, if not before, which you love to see. He's also really aggressive with the football, which is kind of a blessing and a curse.
Hmm.
I think he fits it into tight windows. He makes some spectacular throws that not very many people can make. But then also it can get him in trouble and it can lead to some turnovers from time to time.
Hmm.
Um, he's definitely shown flashes of like elite ball placement, but I think overall he has fairly inconsistent accuracy. I think he does struggle a little bit to ID and react to blitzes at times. And then maybe I'm being too nitpicky here, but his windup and release is a little bit slow, at least in comparison to these other 2 guys who can get the ball out real quick. Um, I don't think that that's going to be a big issue for him, but it's just something worth noting when comparing the 3 of them.
Absolutely. I agree with that. I think out of these three prospects, I feel like Jaden Daniels is more of a ceiling play. You know, you're really hoping that he's going to really pan out at that next level and just bring you over the top, especially with that rushing ability that he has. But I feel like Drake May is more of a, I guess, floor play out of the two, if that makes more sense.
Yeah, I
So
can
it's
see it.
really just that time old debate of ceiling versus floor. But if you're really going for it, I think Jaden Daniels, like you said, he is the more electric prospect out of the two for sure. And he was able to
Yeah,
show that he can throw the ball this year as well. So I love both of them, to be honest. And
absolutely.
moving to the next tier, this tier gets kind of weird for us because I feel like these guys are all sort of interchangeable. It's really just to sort of pick your poison. Which prospect do you think is better than the next? But I'm gonna let Eric name out this tier because he has one more guy than me, so I want to let him name this one out just because I don't forget the name.
Yeah, yeah. So I have, again, like you said, pretty interchangeable. My rankings are kind of fluid right now. I have Michael Penix Jr. in here. I have JJ McCarthy, and I know that you have Bo Nix in this
Hmm.
tier as well, and I'm fine with that. I didn't initially, but he can definitely fit in there as well. Um, we can start with Michael Penix. He's another guy that throws with great anticipation. Also showed flashes of elite ball placement, but similar to Drake May, inconsistent in the accuracy category. He's got a good enough arm. I think people are kind of like putting him in the Tua bucket. I think he's got a little bit better arm than Tua, but kind of similar in terms of his lack of mobility and can't really, throw on the run. He's not like an escape artist like some of the guys at the top of the list. And then the biggest weakness is probably the age and injury history. He's going to be 24 this upcoming NFL season, and he had 4 season-ending injuries during his career. Obviously, they didn't come back to bite him this year. He was able to play the whole year and be healthy and played phenomenally and supported really 3 high-end wide receivers. So you love to see that, but
Hmm.
I think there will be red flags put on him by the NFL draft community in terms of his injuries.
I agree with that. I also think that out of the three guys between Bo Nix, JJ McCarthy, and Michael Penix falls towards the end of this scale for me just because of the injury history, age, stuff like that, but also just some of his play on field in terms of his consistency. I feel like that's something that people didn't really take as much of a look at, even though he did have three good receivers that he was able to sustain. His third down completion rate was 57.4%, which out of the 6 quarterbacks that we've named so far in this video is number 6. Across the middle of the field, he's 69.8%, which is fifth among these 6 quarterbacks. And adjusted completion percentage is 74.1%, which is also last amongst all these guys. So that's just something I was taking a look at. I feel like he's not a bad prospect. This isn't me trying to say don't get Michael Penix. I feel like he's going to pan out wherever it is he ends up at. But I do think these are things that he could improve on in his game. It should be something that we're taking a look at more so in his consistency and just the level of play that he's at because he was able to sustain such good talent at the wide receiver position. I feel like that's stuff that people did overlook a little bit. But I still do like Michael Penix. Obviously, I still have him in this tier. So that's not a huge knock against him. It's just a reason why I have the other two guys ahead of him a little bit.
No, that's totally fair. Who do you want to talk about next?
Let's talk about the guy I feel like we don't really have a whole lot to say about. It's J.J. McCarthy for Michigan. So we went into this college playoff thinking that, Michigan's in it. They're going to be a good team in it. We're finally going to get to see what J.J. McCarthy's about because they're going to be playing some really high-end talent. And we really didn't learn much. I feel like he just kind of did the same thing they did throughout the season, which is he makes the throws when he's called upon to make them, but he's just not called upon to make them very much because they don't need him to. They had two great
Yeah.
running backs, and it's just the team, the way they ran that scheme, it just wasn't necessary for him to have to do too much. He's the youngest quarterback in this class. He's got good arm talent, and the upside really is kind of there. His third down completion percentage, just to compare him to Michael Penix, was 67.1%. So definitely a bump up there. And honestly, I feel like wherever it is he ends up at, he probably shouldn't start right away. But it could be interesting going forward after that first year, after you let him develop a little bit. But in terms of him as a quarterback, it's tough for me to say that he can really create for himself because we haven't seen him really do that. He hasn't really had to do that. But what do you feel about J.J. McCarthy here?
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat, and that's kind of why I had him behind Penix. Although I think his ceiling is definitely higher. One with just the age, but also his athletic ability. He is quite
Yeah.
mobile, and he can get it done on the ground, which could be good for fantasy, assuming that he can actually, be a starting quarterback in the NFL. The arm strength is there, like you mentioned. He's got good ability to throw on the move. He can throw at different platforms, and he can make some tight window throws as well. But like you said, the biggest weakness for me is just what we haven't seen from him, the lack of reliance on him from the team. And also, I don't think he hasn't shown me that he can throw with touch yet. Seems like every ball is a fastball. And so that's going to be difficult when trying to work, seam balls over the middle of the field, deep digs and stuff like that over the linebackers where you need some touch and ability to layer the football. I just haven't seen as much of that from him yet.
I absolutely agree. It's like I said, I wish we had gotten to see more out of him, and it's sad that
Yeah.
like we're only really going to get to see the combine now at this point. But
Right.
the prospect and like the upside is there. It's just a matter of if he is going to pan out at that next level. And we're moving on to the last guy. We got Mr. Bo Nix. This is one of the more, I guess, polarizing players in this draft for sure. If you look at Auburn Bo Nix, you wouldn't want him on your team. But if you look at Oregon Bo Nix, you got no reason to not want him on your team. So it's
True.
tough. He has great arm talent, athleticism to boot along with it. His decision making since he's gone to Oregon has improved tenfold. It's like night and day. They're like two different prospects. But if you take this Bo Nix and you just look at him for what he is, and you look at him as the Oregon prospect, I feel like he's a very high floor prospect. I feel like he's a guy who could find success at the next level if he continues this level of play. It's just a matter of, is Oregon Bo Nix the truth? Or is it Auburn Bo Nix who was put into a system that just worked better for him? You know what I mean? So it's tough. But what do you feel about Bo Nix here?
I basically mirror your opinions.
Yeah.
I'm looking at his stats right now, and they were so impressive this year. Like 77.5% completion percentage is ridiculous. He was, uh, considering he had 470 attempts, the fact that he only had three interceptions
Yeah.
is also ridiculous. Like he was so safe, or not safe, because that's got some negative connotations to where like he was hesitant.
He was
He
smart
was
with the
just
ball.
smart with the football, exactly. 45 touchdowns, almost 10 yards per attempt. Also, really good with his sack avoidance, maybe the best in the class. That wasn't the case when he was at
No.
Auburn, like you mentioned. But since he's gotten to Oregon, his sack avoidance has been fantastic. I do think he's improved from year to year. Like if you're looking at his QB rating, or his passer rating, that's gone up all 5 years that he's been there. But that's the biggest red flag is that it took him that long, and he's a
Hmm.
fifth year senior at this point to get to where he's at. Um, so yeah, I mean, if we're looking at the past 2 years, I think he could have success at the NFL level. And honestly, I think maybe I should have him higher. Just athletically, like he's got the edge over Michael Penix, and production wise, he's in a similar tier as well. I'm just curious what the draft capital and situation is going to be. But like you said at the top, that's going to be the big question for all of these guys.
Yeah, it's Bo Nix is a tough one to really place, but I have him just a little bit ahead of Michael Penix and JJ McCarthy, just off of what he did this last couple of years. And
Yeah.
honestly, man, Cam Newton said he was the truth back when he was a freshman, and part of me is still kind of holding on to that, hoping that that can actually be the truth. So,
Yeah.
but with that being said, I
And
know you
then
got one more guy to talk about over there.
yeah, I don't even really need to talk about him much. I just want to put him on your radar because I think he probably will be drafted in your rookie drafts. That's Michael Pratt out of Tulane. Just another fairly impressive profile. We don't need to dig into it too much. I don't think he belongs in the same conversation as these guys, but might be like a late round pick um, come April in your rookie drafts.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And with that being said, we're going to move over to the tight end portion of this video. We're going to go ahead and kick that off at the top as per usual. And we're starting off with the guy who has been the number one tight end in the country since as long as he's really been in college, to be honest with you. It's Brock Bowers out of Georgia. And this guy, in my opinion, he's just absolutely special. I'm sure he's absolutely special in everyone else's opinion as well. He's the absolute full package. He's dynamic as a receiver and a vertical threat. He's really good after the catch and can make something happen out of nothing. He's tremendous as a blocker as well. I feel like people don't talk about that a lot, but he is a great blocker. And in just 10 games, he had 56 receptions, 714 yards, and 6 touchdowns. So it's just absolutely what you want to see out of a tight end prospect. He's a generational prospect as well. But what do you have for Brock Bowers here? Because I know you can dig a little bit deeper.
He's a monster.
Yeah.
He's so much fun to watch, dude. You talked about the yak ability. I was watching, we produce content, we put out content, we have our own original opinions, but I'm also a consumer of content, and I like
Hmm.
to watch what other people have to say. Debbie to Dynasty is also a good YouTube channel, talking about these 2024 prospects and even further down the line as well. I was watching their video on Brock Bowers, and one of the guys compared him to Mike Allstott with the ball in his hands. Like
Crazy.
he's so aggressive, so physical. Nobody can bring him down. I kind of comp him closer to George Kittle, but in that same realm of just super aggressive when he gets the ball in his hands. Also, great hands, great route running. You mentioned the blocking, you mentioned the athleticism. Historic in terms of his actual production.
Hmm.
Probably top 4 all-time tight end prospect in my opinion. It's just so impressive what he's been able to do. I can't really think of any weaknesses. Like people have pointed to him being undersized, but one, in this day and age of the NFL, that doesn't matter as much.
Mm-mm.
And two, he's actually like bumped his weight up year in and year out. I think he's already up to 240, which is really not that undersized anymore for a tight end. 6'4", 240 is pretty adequate. So I don't know that I have anything negative to say about him.
No, honestly, I've got nothing. Yeah, Brock Bowers, generational, tight end one, undisputed. He's just up there.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys, and hopefully you can get him on your teams if you guys have that kind of draft capital for him.
Absolutely.
With that being said, moving on to number 2, who do you have at the second spot? Obviously, we're down a tier at this point, and we feel like this
Yep.
guy is also in a tier of his own as well, correct?
Yeah, I have Jatavian Sanders here in a tier by himself. It's a steep drop off, but I do like Jatavian Sanders. He's very young. He's only 20 years old right now, 6'4", 245. He's a guy that I think has really, really good hands and body control. I think he's going to
Hmm.
be he's going to be a big red zone threat. I think that's going to be his calling card in the NFL. But he can get it done anywhere on the field. I just think that he's got pretty good straight line speed, but not great acceleration. He's also not super agile, like short area quickness. So I don't think he's going to be a great route runner or a great separator. But like I said, the hands are there. He's also a really good blocker, and I think he's got great strength and physicality, whether it be at the catch point or as a blocker or while running his routes. So fairly complete, in my opinion. Just not to the level that we talked about with Bowers, obviously.
No, obviously, like these guys are going to be a lot less exciting than Brock Bowers is, just as complete prospects. But like you said, he's got good athleticism. He's pretty decent after the catch as well. He has solid hands, like you said, and 39 receptions, 607 yards, and 2 touchdowns in a very talented offense, alongside Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Worthy. Being able to still find that kind of success at the tight end position, I think, is still great for a tight end prospect. But like you said, it's a pretty steep drop off after Brock Bowers, and it's going to get a little bit steeper after this one because the next tier we've got guys like Jaheim Bell, Ben Sinnott. I believe, who did you also have in this tier as well?
I got Bryson Nesbitt out of North Carolina in here.
And I also had Cade Stover in this tier too. So just to start that off, we're going to start with Jaheim Bell. I feel like he's the most exciting guy out of these guys. Obviously, he's one of the smaller prospects at tight end, 6'3", 239. But again, like Eric said, in today's NFL, it doesn't really matter as much. But he is a very good athlete. He runs routes like a wide receiver. He even took some snaps at running back in his college career as well, just because of how versatile he is. So he does kind of bring that versatility to an offense too. He makes some pretty good separation with his route running, I feel like, compared to guys like Jatavian Sanders. But he doesn't really have the most consistent hands to go along with that. There have been some concentration drops, stuff like that. And he's also not the best blocker, but he's not a liability, but he's not the best blocker in this class by far. So at this point, you're kind of betting on upside that an NFL offense could draft him and sort of utilize that versatility that he has and bring some sort of creativity to the offense to get him involved. Because, again, he had 39 catches, 503 yards, and 2 touchdowns, another offense with a lot of mouths to feed. So I feel like, did pretty well as a tight end prospect. Again, it's another drop-off from guys like Jatavian Sanders and obviously Brock Bowers. But in terms of the upside, I feel like he could be a pretty good upside play.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is hard to bet on him reaching his full potential because he didn't do that in college either. Like, I think there's a lot left untapped for him. You mentioned really fluid route runner. I think that that's probably the biggest strength of his game. You mentioned that he kind of runs routes like a wide receiver. I would agree with that. He's got good footwork and he can separate in that regard. I think he's got really, really good yak ability. He's dangerous with the ball in his hands. You mentioned the versatility. He actually had 73 carries. I want to say, what was that? His third year at
I
South
think
Carolina?
I think
Second
so.
year?
I think I remember us seeing this. I'm gonna look it up while you talk.
Yeah, whichever year it was, but yeah, he had more carries than he had receptions. He was used out of the backfield a lot, which you like to see, but also like I don't know, that's not where he's best. I don't think they got the most out of him there. And then the weakness that you mentioned, which I also had, is that he has inconsistent hands. You want to see him clean that up, lessen the drops. He's not like the most natural pass catcher, so hopefully he can improve in that category. But I mean, that's why we have him down here in tier three.
And just to verify, 73 carries for 261 yards and 3 touchdowns in 2022. Compare that to his receiving stats: 25 receptions for 231 yards and 2 touchdowns. So 3 times as many carries, pretty much, as catches. So
Yeah,
he's one of those guys, like we said. You're betting on the upside. You're betting on a team picking him up and being creative with how they use him, and hoping for the
yeah,
best. I guess we can move on to Ben Sinnott out of Kansas State. 6'4", 245. He's got a good build. He's a solid route runner with pretty good technique, and I feel like he's also pretty good after the catch. And he's got reliable hands, not the best hands in this class, obviously, but they're reliable, and he's a good blocker to go along with that. He also played some fullback in college as well, so that's sort of a
yep.
testament to how good his blocking is. And with 49 receptions, 676 yards, and 6 touchdowns on the season, he was a pretty featured part of this offense. But what do you feel about Ben Sinnott here?
I don't have a whole lot to add. I think that was a good summary. He's kind of a do-it-all tight end, really
Hmm.
well-rounded, but not elite in any one aspect. Um, I think he's also fairly good after the catch. And then, the weakness that I had is that he didn't really have much production through his first 2 years, but that's also partly due to the fact that he converted from fullback to tight end.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't expect to see, big receiving numbers from a fullback. So that makes a lot of sense. I don't see a lot of holes in his game. It's just that he's not spectacular or flashy in any other aspect.
Right, like he can go to any NFL team, probably be a tight end too, and find a lot of success in the league, to be honest.
Yeah, that's where I
Um,
have him as well.
Hell yeah. Where do you want to go next with this one? Because I know we have two different prospects here.
Yeah, so I did have Cade Stover, who you have in this tier, in my honorable mention. Do you want to talk about him first?
Yeah, we can do it. So Cade Stover, obviously out of Ohio State, 6'4", 251, so pretty good build there, but not an athlete. I will say, not really an athlete. His route running isn't really great, but I will say he does have some of the best hands in this class. He's very good at contested catches, makes 50-50
Yeah.
balls, more like 80-20 balls, really. He's a very good blocker compared to other tight ends in this class, and he consistently wins against defensive ends, which is something you really do want to see out of a tight end who's going to be on the field a lot. He's tough to bring down after the catch. Obviously, with his size, he's just kind of a bowling ball out there. And 41 receptions for 576 yards and 5 touchdowns is nothing to shake a stick at, especially at Ohio State. So I feel like Cade Stover, he's not going to be a world breaker at the tight end position, but he's going to be a guy that NFL teams will value, and he will see a lot of playing time just because of how good of a blocker he is as well. And the fact that he does have some receiving ability to go along with that, I think will go a pretty long way.
Yeah. No, I agree with everything you had to say there. Really good size at 6'4", 250. I was really impressed with his hands as well, but you mentioned not an athlete, not going to be a route
Mm-mm.
runner or a separator. Um, yeah, I value yards after catch in tight ends pretty highly. I think that that's pretty important for fantasy production, and that's you mentioned he's hard to tackle, but he's
Yeah,
not gonna
he's not getting far.
extend. Yeah, he's not gonna go far before you're able to eventually bring him down, which is why I had him a little bit lower. But I do think that he could be a red zone threat, and I think he will. He's gonna make an NFL roster and be impactful because of the blocking ability and his hands. So definitely worthy of being talked about in this category. And then the last the last guy that I had in the tier was Bryson Nesbitt out of North Carolina. 21 years old, 6'5", 240 pounds. I do think he's one of the more natural pass catchers of the group. He's a good athlete and had immediate production from his freshman year, which you love to see. He is a true junior and is an early declare, so you like that from an analytics standpoint. In terms of weaknesses, definitely not a good blocker. Probably the worst of the bunch that we've talked about so far, which you can talk about the pros and cons of that from a fantasy standpoint. Like if he can make an NFL roster and they want to use him as a pass catcher, that might be a good thing because he's not going to have to stay in line and block very much. But also, it makes it less likely that he's going to be sought after by an NFL team because he's a liability in that regard. Um, I do think he has a little bit of a limited route tree. It's mostly vertical routes and seams and stuff like that, but he is really good at those. And then just not very physical, which kind of goes along with the size concerns and lack of blocking ability.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Like you said, you want to see a tight end be able to block because they're going to see the field a ton, and it's going to be what NFL teams are going to really be looking for. But like you said, if they're able to, some team is able to pick him up and capitalize on his receiving ability, I think he could be a great play in the NFL in Dynasty, however it is you want to really look at it, whatever perspective.
Yeah.
And for my honorable mention here, I've got Benjamin Urasek out of Stanford. I just feel like he's a guy he's a good route runner and he consistently wins balls on contested catches, but he's not great after the catch. He's one of those guys that is going to get tackled pretty early, probably on first contact, so that's not great. Um, he's a fine blocker as well. Like I don't think he's a bad blocker. I don't think he's a necessarily good blocker, but he's just good enough. He's most valuable really across the middle of the field. That's where he's most effective. And he, like I said earlier, he's great at making those contested catches in traffic, stuff like that. He only played 6 games this past season, so he had a pretty limited season. But in those 6 games, he's able to get 16 catches for 239 yards and a touchdown. So there was some production to be found in that. I'm not saying he's going to be a world breaker at the next level, but he could be a diamond in the rough, somebody that a team picks up as a tight end too, who could find some success as well. Um, I'm not super excited about him. That's why he's kind of all the way back here. But I do feel like he is someone that should at least be mentioned, have on your radar at least.
Yeah. I like Urasek as well. The guy that I had in my honorable mention is Brevin Spanford. Monster size, 6'7", 270. But again, not super excited about his receiving ability. I do think with that size, he can obviously box out physical guys, wins 50-50 balls. I think he can be a red zone threat, but he's really slow. He's not athletic. He's not a route runner or separator. He's a sixth-year senior and is mostly used as a blocker. So I think he will like make an NFL team because I think he is really good in that regard. But I don't, I, you know, just putting him on your radar. I don't think he's going to be like a difference maker for you on your dynasty teams.
Nah, absolutely. I like the take on that. I think we would be amiss to just not have him on the list at all, not mention him. So
Yeah.
I feel like he's great right there. But with that being said, guys, that's going to round out both of our lists for quarterbacks and tight ends. Kind of a not dense video, but a lot of stuff talked about, a lot of different stuff talked about. So make sure you guys sound off in the comments down below if you disagree or agree with any of our rankings, or if you have any more context to add to what it is that we have about these guys, because maybe there's something in the picture that we're missing. Let us know in the comments down below. And make sure you do all that great YouTube stuff. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that notification bell. That way you know when we drop all of our latest videos. We have some player evals on the way coming from Eric. So that's some exciting stuff going forward. And Eric, you got anything else for the people before we get out of here?
Yeah, just real quickly, if you guys could check the links down in the description below, we have some cool stuff down there. If you're interested in joining our Discord and becoming part of that community, it's ever growing. We're talking in there every single day about, dynasty, redraft, trades, all sorts of different stuff, even just regular life stuff. So if you want to be part of the community, come join up over there. Also, check the links to our partners, whether it be CMG, which I know Will is wearing that Choice Music Group hoodie right now, or Do Numbers if you're interested in some cool hoodies, merch, hats, t-shirts, any sort of apparel that you're looking for. And we also have a promo code, a discount code, linked down there as well. So go use that. That would be fantastic. But I think that's all I got. So as always, if you guys stuck with us all the way till the end, we love you. And we will catch you in the next video. Peace.
Peace.